Vanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakapa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyapadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. First seeking the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas assembled, especially His Grace Tulsi Prabhu, so I can speak something of proper utility for our spiritual life. I feel very humbled that I've been given the opportunity to serve the Srimad Bhāgavatam. So although I feel very unqualified, I take it as the mercy of the devotees and my spiritual master that I can do some service and try. So for anything I speak that's of proper accordance, all the glories go to Hari Guru and Vaishnava, and anything I speak that might go against our Siddhanta of our Acharyas, please forgive me and please correct me. So I first saw in this part of the purport, the Lord is so kind that any soul who wants to enjoy in this material world is given full facility for enjoyment. And at the same time, He has shown the path of salvation. That's amazing. Krishna is actually providing everything, literally every single way that He wants to fulfill our desires. So, I was thinking like Krishna saying, okay, yeah, you want to enjoy, like when you realize you actually can't be the enjoyer, you can go there, and then I'll give you the map to come back. So here you can go, and then when you're sincere and you realize that you don't, want to do this anymore, and it's not your position, then I'll give you the map. You can come back. And here's your guide. I'll send your guide for you too. It'll be your eternal father and your eternal guide in the form of your spiritual master. So I thought that point was really nice just to reflect on and begin with. But I also just find it so amazing that the Bhagavatam so casually describes such like massive time scales. If we look at the reign of one Manu, it's, I think, 4,320,000 times 72 solar years in our concept of time. I think that's so amazing. There's 14 Manus just in one day of Brahma, and there's 100 days of Brahma. It's fascinating how the Bhagavatam can throw out these numbers, but these material scientists, they actually don't take any heed to it. But they still list their own numbers and their own predictions, and everyone just jumps onto it. So I was thinking that reflection, so many people don't want to accept these things because it's spiritual. And there's a story with Swayam Bhagavan and Keshava Maharaj. He was talking about how the brahmacharis one day went on a field trip to a science museum. And they saw that there was this big plaque that talked about some massive scientific discovery. And it said, millions of years ago, this specific thing changed by 0.0001%. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, I buy it, And of course, the science could be correct. It's not that everything in modern science is wrong, but I find it fascinating how people take certain conditions in order to accept truth without actually using reason and logic. So I wanted to first give some fun facts. Here it's talking about Swayambhuva Manu, and of course the duty of Swayambhuva Manu, as it talks about in the purport, to reestablish spiritual knowledge and scriptural regulations for the salvation of the conditioned souls. So there's a book called The Big Bang and the Sages, and it's a very scientific presentation to the authority of the Puranas and the Vedas. And so I thought I'd talk about the 7 Manvantara periods, just some fun facts before we get started with the rest of the class. So Swayambhuva Manu period started about 3.9 billion years ago. And modern science actually agrees with the statement. Usually there's something called a pralaya, which is what you would call a mass extinction or some type of extinction in this, for us to properly understand it in English. And modern science actually says that the earth was most likely covered with water about 4 billion years ago. And that was the time that the earth was submerged in the Garbhodaka ocean. Here Brahma even says in the Srimad Bhāgavatam 3:13-17, while I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. And then, of course, later, Vraha comes out of his nostril and Brahma's totally bewildered. Like, I mean, I don't know what I would do if a boar came out of my nostril and then it was actually an expansion of Krishna, and then that boar like ended up taking the planet Earth back to its orbit. It's just amazing. So, yeah, another example that science is lining up with here, and this Manvantara is in between. The first and the seventh don't have like as like amazing, blowing away evidence, but there's still some interesting, significant things to consider. The second Manvantara transition period began around 3.3 billion years ago, and modern science has actually found evidence for an onset of highly productive marine life, so like a big growth and spike in marine life. There's also evidence for like the largest igneous eruption in a span from 4 billion to 2.7 years ago. So that's within that time range. Then we go to the third Manvantara, which began 2.7 billion years ago. And modern science, they say that the reorganization of the global sulfur cycles, which talks about like oxygen, increasing in oxygen levels, which means that's life's actually being generated again. So once again, in the Manvantara period, modern science is finding evidence of rapid like increase of oxygen levels, which signifies increase of life, also 2.7 billion years ago. The fourth Manvantara period began about 2.09 billion years ago, and another dramatic rise in Earth's oxygen levels estimated between 2.2 and 2.06 billion years ago. So that's also within the time range. The fifth and sixth Manvantara began about 1.47 billion years ago, and the sixth about 858 million years ago. And unfortunately, in modern science, there's like a big time gap within this time, but actually they have evidence in between this time stamp that there's like a diversification of what's called eukaryotes, which are like single-celled organisms, like a nucleus. There's organisms with a nucleus within it. So that also means life could be expanding at that time, another time when the Manvantara is beginning. So another really significant is the seventh Manvantara, which is what we are in right now, the Vaivaswata Manu. This began about 241.056 billion years ago, and modern science talks about what's called the end Permian mass extinction. So this extinction is known to modern science as the most severe extinction of all time, at least in their research. And studies from MIT have shown that it occurred about 251.939 million years ago, or billion. Million. So this began 241.056 million years ago, and modern science is saying 251 million years ago, about. So it's amazing to see how close these are, and even the pralaya during this last Manvantara, according to the Puranas, is the most severe. So it's fascinating to see how these things are correlating. Now, it's not just going to be some jargon scientific Bhāgavatam class the whole time, but I just wanted to state these things to show the authenticity of the Bhagavad Purana, of the Srimad Bhāgavatam, and the Vedas, and just showing this appreciation for the Parampara and Srila Prabhupada for maintaining this knowledge and giving it properly. I mean, what would we do if we had this knowledge but we didn't have the Bhaktivedanta purports? You know, what would we do if we didn't have everything properly preserved, and, you know, disciples of Srila Prabhupada who are also properly preserving this, and so on, to continue this spreading of Krishna consciousness with conditioned souls like myself. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Shaunaka Rishi is inquiring to Suta Goswami about what Swayambhuva Manu did when the earth was reinstated, and of course Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport to instill Dharma again and rid of adharma or irreligion. And so this is pretty much the duty of the parampara as well. The duty of the parampara is to maintain these things throughout each lifetime and each disciplic succession, so we can actually properly present the Vedas in a way for people to attain spiritual realization, and thus potentially reinstill their relationship with Krishna. So pretty much the Bhagavatam, as we see, is just an amazing compilation of like perfect questions and perfect answers. And of course it starts with Ata Prichami Samsiddhim, asking about begging actually for the perfection. What is the way for the perfection of all beings, and especially one who's about to die? Maharaj Parikshit's asking that question to Shukadev Goswami. And then Suta Goswami is narrating that conversation. And then Sukadev Goswami is narrating a conversation about Maitreya and Vidura, and so on and so on. So it's these like narrations of conversations about conversations about conversations and situations. And it's amazing how this works, because this is how things are preserved through the parampara and the power of the parampara. Talking about, oh yeah, well, this long ago, later back, this happened, and then that conversation leads to another thing, and it's like amazing how all these things are linked. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the power of parampara and the importance of it. So I wanted to first start with what the meaning of guru is, what guru tattva, like tattva is like that, or like truth. So His Holiness Varshana Swami once said in a lecture I heard, when someone has one guru, he has many gurus. But when he has many gurus, he has no guru. So what does this actually mean? So the meaning of guru is that the guru is actually one. The guru is one through instruction. So, of course, the guru is manifested to us in different forms and different ways for us to connect with the guru. Here in the temple itself, we have different spiritual masters. But actually, in technical terms, the spiritual master is the same, because they're abiding by the same teachings and they're preserving the same knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada gave a nice example talking about a postman. And the postman, his duty is to, let's say he has like $1 million check. The postman's duty is to take that check and deliver it to you without adding anything to it, writing anything on it, just giving it to you as it is. And Srila Prabhupada, so I was thinking, the guru is like a transcendental postman in one example. Of course, just an example for us to understand it better, but I thought that was an interesting analogy. And so Srila Prabhupada says when the postman does his business perfectly, he's perfect, even if he has imperfection. And this is a really important point, because sometimes I think we expect the externals of the guru to be like, what you see in the cinemas. Like swaying hair or flowing robes and severe austerities, or whatever it is that we find super attractive externally. But this made me think of the 6th verse in the Nectar of Instruction, where I'll just read the verse in itself. Dristai swabhava janitarva bhushascha doshar na prakritatvam bhakta janasya pashyet Ganga basam na kalubud buddha fena pankar Brahma javatvam apagachi niradharmahe. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee. But despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges waters do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. I remember when I first heard Srila Prabhupada give a lecture. I never heard Srila Prabhupada give a lecture before. I was reading books, and I was so into his books, but I was so thrown off by his voice and his Bengali accent. I wasn't, my expectation was so different. And so many times, things can be present right before us, but due to our external vision, it's actually limiting us to see the capabilities of that devotee. What to speak of a pure devotee who is potentially our spiritual master. So this is a thing to really consider, especially nowadays, to be really careful on how we view devotees and how we're, perceiving especially pure devotees. Krishna says, I think it's text 30 of chapter 9 in the Gita, that even if one commits abominable acts, he is still to be considered a saintly person if he's engaged in service to me. And so, of course, this is on accidental mistakes, not someone who's committing the 7th offense by chanting with the desire to nullify all of his sinful reactions and continue to do sinful reactions and actions. But it's very important to consider this point, especially in our parampara. You have someone like Gorakishore Das Babaji who would be chanting near bathrooms or in bathrooms because no one would bother him. And I heard this in a lecture that, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur wouldn't he wouldn't necessarily tell his disciples a lot about Gaur Kishore Das Babaji because they wouldn't understand, It's a totally different mood. And so the power of parampara is to maintain this message, but to give it in a way for the proper timings for us to understand it. So I also wanted to share those Manvantara facts because Srila Prabhupada was so adamant on also establishing the Vedic knowledge as a scientific fact. And nowadays we have modern science it's pretty much like a religion. I mean, you have actual science and then you have scientism. So scientism is okay, well, we're just going to trust what the scientists say, whatever they say, because, they're doing the work and, they have this statistical test. But actually, if you look at statistics, and the way you perform statistics, something that's significant can be variably different. And then you have actual science, which is trying to understand, the root cause of things, of what actually is our existence. You see these older scientists, like Galileo or, Newton, even Einstein. They had such a deeper curiosity about the meaning of life. It wasn't just okay, well, this is my job and this is what I have to do and this research is my only life and soul, but they wanted to understand how God's creation worked. So nowadays that's kind of drifted, and thanks to Srila Prabhupada bringing these transcendental literatures, we're able to get a better grip as to how to connect science and spirituality. When I was studying psychology at my university, I always wanted to find ways to branch the two. And I had maybe one professor that was actually interested. Other professors would just kind of branch it off because they're so consumed by this dogmatic structure of science, which is really unfortunate because the Bhāgavatam is clearly presenting so many scientific things that are lining up with modern scientific dates. So what to speak of spiritual knowledge? These aren't physics textbooks. So once again, glories to the Parampara and to Srila Prabhupada for maintaining this and presenting this knowledge as it is in a way for us to understand it. So I thought that was really important. There's an example of a circuit. So in spiritual life, it's not just a whimsical thing where, all of a sudden we just surrender to someone oh, it's in the heart, Prabhu, But Srila Prabhupada was very emphatic on establishing the Diksha initiation as well, taking initiation from a guru. Because that is plugging you into the circuit. So when we're getting plugged into the circuit, there's a bunch of different fuses that are getting channeled, and all of a sudden it'll go back to the source from Krishna. But that power is remaining the same as long as that line is maintained. So as aspiring sadhakas and aspiring servants of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples, we should also remember that we have a duty to continue to further this movement and further share this knowledge. Whether you're being an actual Diksha Guru or just a Shiksha Guru for someone, or just mentoring someone that is still improving on spiritual life, it's very important. There was a purport, I believe in the fourth chapter of the Gita. It's the second verse or the third verse? Yeah, third verse. And I thought this was nice, so I'll read it, because it gives a nice example of how the parampara maintains this knowledge, and why it's so important to stay in the parampara and not deviate. Because when you deviate, your road gets swiveled. Her Grace Malati, Mother Malati, she once said to me, just make sure to keep your road straight, staying, with the devotees in ISKCON and associating with devotees in ISKCON. So it's not meant for that to be a dogmatic thing. Of course, we can respect other sampradayas and other people worshiping Krishna. But it's really important because we have a certain philosophy in order for us to grow and understand, and especially a Chintya Bheda philosophy that Krishna himself has given us through Lord Chaitanya, as this form of Lord Chaitanya. It's very important. So I thought I'd read this purport as well that Srila Prabhupada talks about between what is actual maintaining of scripture and what isn't. There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjuna as the recipient of this great science owing to his being a devotee of the Lord. But for the demon it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge. Some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentations by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjuna accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demonic, however, do not accept Lord Krishna as he is. Instead, they concoct something about Krishna and mislead general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. This is a really important point because His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami once said in a lecture, he was asked, why is Mayavad philosophy the last snare of Maya? He said it's because it appears spiritual. So even someone who talks about God in some way, like surrender to God, or, I'm just, working to connect with God, whatever that is, what are they actually meaning? It's one thing to be bewildered by that and be, that sounds really nice, and we can be swans and take the good out of that meaning. But what is actually the underlying intention of what they're doing? So a demon isn't just always flat out saying like Krishna doesn't exist or that God doesn't exist. The demon is sometimes saying, no, actually you're God and I'm God too. So these scriptures and these translations are very dangerous. So when we stay in the parampara, we're receiving the mercy of all these acharyas that have stuck true to their spiritual master. So Krishna, of course, says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidi panipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadikshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattva darshinaha. So to understand the absolute truth, one should inquire from a bona fide spiritual master. One should inquire to him submissively and render service unto him. The pure devotees, or the self-realized soul, can impart knowledge into you because Gyaninas Tattva Darshana, they've seen the truth. And they've seen the truth, they will say, by the mercy of their spiritual master. And their spiritual master will say they've seen the truth by the mercy of their spiritual master, and so on and so on. So this is how the science works. It's not that we can just whimsically choose anyone because we think that, or like, you have, I don't mean to get in a criticizing attitude, but you have certain yogis, who like will pull out gold and people will say, oh my God, this is God, I have to surrender to him. So instead, we can actually work to see how this process operates and connecting with the spiritual master that is properly serving the parampara. And that's how knowledge is maintained. Otherwise, it's not being based on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. That's the whole point of the authenticity of the Vedas, and especially the ripened fruit of the Vedas, the Srimad Bhāgavatam. Because Sanskrit's so complex and can be interpreted in so many ways. But the actual meaning, someone asked Srila Prabhupada one time, there's many interpretations in the Bhagavad Gita, and Srila Prabhupada says, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre. What does that mean? It's a battlefield. What are they doing? They're assembling on the battlefield. How can you interpret this any other way? So it's amazing how strict he's staying to understanding Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he doesn't give any room for anyone to make commentaries or arguments towards his translations of the Gita. Even in earlier chapters, it seems like, well, nothing's mentioned about Bhakti Yoga here. But actually, the summary of the Gita talks about Sarva Dharmam Prityaja, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Moksha Ishyami Mashucha. Krishna is saying, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. So Srila Prabhupada is giving that throughout the entire book so we can keep understanding the main understanding of the Gita. And so many revered scholars have really appreciated that because Srila Prabhupada's not only translating the words, but he's translating the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. So, very important to see the importance of finding a spiritual master within a proper sampradaya, and specifically our Brahma Madhva Gaudiya sampradaya, and especially connecting with Srila Prabhupada, who was so dear to his spiritual master, fully surrendering to his orders and to the holy name. So how fortunate are we to be able to have the opportunity to connect with Srila Prabhupada and all these acharyas through this line. It's really incredible, actually. I mean, I remember one time I was sitting with my spiritual master, and I just was totally bewildered. I was like, I don't know how I got here. And he just started laughing, because I think he similarly felt the same way by Srila Prabhupada, simply by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna and the devotees. So we should really, really appreciate how fortunate we are, and we should really appreciate how much Srila Prabhupada has given us. It's so easy to, get caught up in like the mechanical processes of, Vaidhi Bhakti and, following the certain steps and following the regular principles. It's very important. But if we don't actually understand why we're doing it, then we're not going to have an internal weight. There's not going to be a conviction. It's one thing to follow through blind faith and having blind faith and surrender, but when you're actually having conviction based off of real experience and application, it's so much deeper. Blind faith can be like, it teeters and it totters, it can sway. But when you're actually fixed in real experience, then that faith is deeply rooted and it can become indestructible at some point by the mercy of Hari Guru and Vaishnava, and our endeavor, of course. So, we also have a responsibility to speak this knowledge properly, to study Srila Prabhupada's books, and to properly quote Shastra. Yesterday there was a really nice Jewish man, and he came up and was speaking to Arjunananda and I, and he was really curious, he was really intrigued, and all of a sudden I said, hey, what book are you reading? He pulls it up, it's like some thing about yoga and like connecting with God, and I was like, oh my God, this is Krishna's arrangement. But he was asking such nice questions, and without the understanding of books from Srila Prabhupada and through like being taught through my mentors, I wouldn't have actually been able to give him proper answers. I was always so used to like kind of a speculative mindset. I was always kind of like this like Gyani, like, oh, well, maybe it could be this, or, well, that says that, but maybe it could be that. But after reading Srila Prabhupada's books and associating with devotees, I realized how important it is to stick to truth. And what higher truth do we have than the Srimad Bhāgavatam? And he was really blown away by that. Really blown away by our philosophy. He was really interested, very intrigued. He took a Bhagavad Gita. So I hope he someday comes to the temple and associates with the devotees. But this is an example to show how important it is to just like say the knowledge as it is. Like it's not that we have to sugarcoat it with things. We can present the knowledge as it is during time, place, and circumstance. I heard this lecture by my spiritual master saying, someone got a book, I think it was on spiritual yoga, and the first page says like, don't act like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. So like that can be seen as like something that's really harsh. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to give that book. That person came to the temple like I think the next day or within the next week after reading it. Yeah, dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. Okay, yeah, I don't want to be an animal, So I think sometimes it's easy to sugarcoat things based on a natural psychological composition to want to please other people and make them feel comfortable. But actually, spiritual knowledge isn't meant to make you feel comfortable. It's meant to actually make you realize that there's so many things you have to unlearn through your conditioning. And we can do that, of course, in a proper manner. You're not just like running up to someone on the streets, you're in Maya, Prabhu, like, come on, wake up. Of course, we can do things in a proper way. But we have to still abide by the authority of the parampara. Otherwise, we're just doing things whimsically, and it's speculation. And speculation is the last thing that our parampara would encourage. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was so emphatic on making us understand how important it is to read his books. There's that famous, situation with he and Tamal Krishna Goswami, and he's saying, do you know why I read my books? And, they're like, Srila Prabhupada reads his books, Do you know why I read my books? Because Krishna personally, I'm paraphrasing, but Krishna personally helped me write these books. So there's realizations in here that Srila Prabhupada is saying that he's being guided through the parampara. It's not just like simply on his own realization. Of course, we get that, and it's very, very nice. But he was so strict on staying true to the parampara. I heard this nice story with His Holiness Gaura Govinda Swami, and he asked one of his disciples, like, what is in his great, what is the praman? What is the evidence? Can you quote scripture? And they said, no, Guru Maharaj, I can't quote. He said, he's a cheater! Don't be a crooked person. A Vaishnava quotes authority. So of course, he's chastising his disciple in a loving manner. But yeah, to maintain the status of parampara, it's so vital to study Shastra and to try and memorize verses. I know I myself am very poor with that sometimes. So I'm speaking this for my reminder as well. But yeah, of course, the spiritual master is a direct representative of Krishna. So to honor his mercy that he's been giving us, the best thing we can do is actually honor the parampara that he's connected us to, and honor the knowledge and wisdom that we're receiving through this specific parampara by, studying, as I said, Shastra and things like that. Every morning we're saying Shakshadaritvena Samasta Shastra. The conclusion of the Shastra is that the spiritual master is considered non-different from Krishna himself. Of course, Krishna is non-different from his names, his pastimes, and his, I'm blanking out on the word, associates. So the more that we work to surrender to the spiritual master, the more we can actually receive that mercy. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tataguro tasyaite katita hirta prakashante mahatmanaha. What a mystical process. To that rare soul who is implicit faith in the spiritual master and Krishna, the entirety of the purport of the Vedas are revealed to him through the heart. I mean, that's amazing. So this is really all I had to present today. I just wanted to really speak about the importance of the parampara and the scientific process of spiritual knowledge. It's not just like some whimsical thing. It's being maintained for years and years and years and years and lifetimes and millenniums. So, we can just really appreciate, firstly, the authoritative knowledge of the Puranas in itself, but also the essence of that knowledge, which is working to surrender to the spiritual master and serving the spiritual master, so we can discover our, understanding of who we are actually. Who are we actually? We're a spirit soul, but who are we actually in connection with Krishna, and all these important points in our devotional life as we continue to grow. So this is all I had to say. Thank you for tolerating my class. And if I said something right, as I said, it's by the mercy of the devotees and of Krishna and the Guru. And if I spoke something of incorrect manner, I pray to be corrected so that I can properly maintain humility and proper knowledge. If there's any comments or questions, yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Roji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a wonderful class. I had kind of fill in the blanks kind of a thing. So it says in the purport, it is understood here that Manu creates scriptural regulations. So I wanted to understand, how did Manu get that knowledge? Like, has it to do with Lord giving it to Vishwanku, I think, son of God, and then coming from there, or is it from Lord Brahma that this knowledge is transferred to Manu?
To my understanding, Swayambhuva Manu is a Manvantara avatar. So, but to my understanding, he's also an empowered. I'm not sure if it's Shaktivesh Swayambhuva Manu, but I think he's listed in one of the 24 avatars in the first canto of the Bhāgavatam. So he's also directly empowered by Krishna. That's my understanding. I'm not actually sure if he's receiving that knowledge from Brahma. Maybe Tulsi or Ramroy Prabhu could elaborate on that more, but I'm not quite sure.
Hare Krishna. Well, there are different categories of avatars, and Swayambhuva Manu, he is part of the, you could say, Manvantara avatars. We put him in this category. Technically, what I learned in Mayapur is that actually he is not himself the Manvantara avatara, but rather while he is ruling for this, 72
millions of years.
Yes, for this period there is a special avatar that comes and it's present in the universe. And the idea is that in case there is some serious problems in the universe, this avatar will help Manu so that he can continue ruling nicely the universe. But generally, in the devotee circles, we consider him like part of this group, Manvantara avatars. So we have Manvantara avatars, Guna avatars, Lila avatars, Shaktiyavesh avatars. So he is part of this group. Is that okay?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, just regarding the statement Prabhupada is mentioning, that it is understood here that Manu creates scriptural regulations for salvation of the conditioned souls.
Mm.
So I was thinking it's such a vital statement because in India there is a university in Delhi called the JNU University, Jawaharlal Nehru University. So in JNU University, they every year they print a copy of Manu Samhita and burn it,
Mm.
just to show that we don't care for these rules and regulations. To show that we don't care for it, and makes no sense today.
Mm.
Yeah, it's more atheistic class of people. So, actually, so therefore Prabhupada very clearly mentions that actually rules and regulations are meant for those who want something higher in life.
Mm.
And the rules and regulations in spiritual circle, these rules and regulations are much higher than mundane rules and regulations.
Mm.
Why? Because these rules and regulations become relishable as one advances in Krishna consciousness.
Mm.
Like getting up early, initially it's poisonous, as Bhagavad Gita says. But later on, it is nectarian to get up early and do some nice sadhana and everything.
Mm.
Initially, to sit down and chant is like poison, but later on it's nectarian. Why just 16? Prabhupada said, why not 16,000 rounds? So like that, the rules and regulations in spiritual circle become relishable as one advances also.
Mm.
So they are way different from the rules and regulations of the material world. So therefore, we respect rules and regulations, and we honor them by following them nicely and strictly, so that gradually those rules and regulations are meant for the salvation of the conditioned souls. That means they will actually uplift us to the platform of Raghunaga Bhakti if we follow them. If we don't follow them, it's very difficult. Yashastam vidimutsujya, vartate kamakarataha. Nasa siddhim avapnoti, na sukham na parangatim. It's only down way for such a living entity. I just thought of sharing that with respect to that statement.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you. Yeah, it's so important to understand like where we are, to properly keep following the regular principles. I think Srila Prabhupada translates a verse in the second chapter. I can't remember. It's later in this. Maybe like it's within the verses of 54 to 72. But he translates it to like following the regular principles of freedom. So, in order to actually be free, I remember Arjunananda Prabhu gave a class talking about like, who's more free? The dog on the street or the dog that's being taken care of by its owner? And so immediately we might think it's the dog on the street, but actually no, it's the dog that's being taken care of by its owner. He has more freedom to do things because he doesn't have to worry as much about getting food. The other dog is continuously a slave to its mind and its senses and its bodily desires. So, yeah, thank you.
I was also thinking in regards to the scientists. In the beginning you were speaking about them. So basically, ideally the scientists, they should be a brahmanas, and they should have the freedom to really find the truth. But actually what we see nowadays is that there are very rich people and they buy the scientists to work for them, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why they cannot present the reality as it is. I was thinking when you were speaking about it.
Yeah, that's such a vital point. Even I remember I did a research paper when I was in college about Purdue Pharma. And so they were the company that created OxyContin, the painkiller that pretty much created the opiate epidemic in the United States. And so they actually falsified the data. So that means that these scientists that they were being paid, they were literally paid to falsify this data, even though they knowingly did so, and they've created millions and thousands of suffering people and conditioned souls simply by that. So that's a good point to make as well. Thank you.
Actually, in that connection, there is this pastime of, in Lilamrita it comes, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking, he found that there was the rich man who would donate a lot to his matas. He was sitting at the back, and he was, I think he was talking to someone or talking to Abhay Babu, I'm not sure. But he was talking. He was not very attentive in the class. And immediately Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur looked at him and chastised him in the public, saying, "Do you think you have bought me through your donations?" He said. So therefore, the duty of a Brahmana is he doesn't get, he's not indebted to anyone. That means we don't accept facilities so that they can actually manipulate us in the future. You know, similarly, even for us, I've seen many senior brahmacharis, when they speak, many people want to offer, you know, a lot of facilities for them, but they don't accept. They say, thank you, I'm good. I'm happy in the brahmacharya ashram. They say, you know, you can come at my home and stay. But they don't generally accept, just so that they don't want to be indebted. If one feels indebted, then he hesitates to speak the truth. And that is, sadhu means he should be speaking the truth. Isn't it? So therefore they are very careful in such regard. They don't want to be manipulated, or they don't want to be under anyone like that.
Prabhu, you had a question?
No, I'm no one to speak anything in between such great devotees, but just a small point to extend onto the same topic of trusting scientists was to deal with the smoke industry, where cigarettes were advertised as not harmful in 1970s,
Right.
and that's when most people took up smoking, and that was also the point when hippie culture was rising as well. And people are advertising that there's no harmful effects of cigarettes as such. And then there was a downfall in 1990s where people were severely getting the effects of doing cigarettes, like they were having cancer. And then that's when it was like the person who was responsible for the cigarette industry, like he falsified the data showing that it is healthy, and then later it was proven wrong in 1990s. And then but still powerful people have ways to make sure that they don't go down. So, but something that we need to be careful when we are trusting modern science, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm more of a scientifically minded person myself, so it's not like you just like decry anything that's considered scientific. How does your phone work? Right? You have certain waves that it's connecting to, and that's how you make phone calls. It's not like that's bogus, Prabhu. You know? I mean, no. This is we can use science for what it is, but we also have to understand that not everyone has that intention to actually understand who Krishna is, to actually understand who God is, connect with God. So, as Tulsi Prabhu was saying, there are very powerful demons that are operating on the planet that are actually manipulating these things. So the more we distribute books, the more that we chant the holy name and engage in the process of Sankirtan, then the more that this ether can be purified and more people can get the chance to be purified. There's a nice scientific example with monkeys. And some monkeys on one island, there was the same culture of monkeys on another island far away, maybe even across the ocean, I'm not sure. But one monkey started washing sweet potatoes that they would find, or like nuts or things in the water. And then another monkey followed, and then another monkey followed. And it was like, I can't remember if it was like 50 to 51 or like 100 and 101. But after that tipping point, all the monkeys started doing it. And the crazy thing about it was that across at the other island, the other monkeys started doing it without any, connection to the other monkeys on that island that first started. So that's a good point. Keep our discernment always on. But anyways, past time. Thank you very much for allowing me to serve the Srimad Bhāgavatam. All glories to the Parampara, all glories to Srila Prabhupada and the devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki